Start where you are. Learn to work with what you have. Written by Kelvin W. Nathan. Published by Audiobooks Office. Introduction. There is a sacred, often overlooked truth hiding in plain sight. You already have something worth building with. Not someday, not when you've acquired more money, more knowledge, more followers, or more validation. Right now, in this moment, you have something in your hands. A skill, an idea, a relationship, a story, a heartbeat that carries the seeds of your next level. But here's the twist. The world has taught us to ignore what's in our hands and to obsess over what's out of reach. We live in a culture addicted to the chase. The next promotion, the next breakthrough, the next version of ourselves. Cleaner, richer, sharper, more polished. We scroll past curated lives and start believing that until we look like that, we can't start. That lie becomes a cage. It convinces us that we're always behind, always missing something, always one step away from ready. But readiness isn't a destination, it's a decision. And abundance doesn't show up when everything's perfect. It begins the moment you learn to honor what's already present. This book is about abundance not as an outcome, but as a mindset, a daily posture of attention, stewardship, and creativity. Abundance says, there's something here. Maybe it's not finished. Maybe it's not everything I hoped for, but there is something, and I can work with it. That shift changes everything. Suddenly you move from waiting to creating. From comparing to cultivating, from grasping to growing. You stop being a consumer of your own life and become an architect. When I say what's in your hands, I mean the tools you've been given, the experiences you've lived through, the voice you carry, the community around you, and even the wounds you've been healing from. Too often, we discount our gifts because they don't look shiny or spectacular. We dismiss our stories because they came wrapped in struggle. But there is untapped treasure buried in the places we overlook. And the moment we start paying attention, we begin the real work of building a life of purpose. Let me be clear, starting where you are doesn't mean settling. It doesn't mean staying stuck. It means anchoring your next step in reality, not fantasy. It means embracing what you already have, even if it's not enough to build the whole vision, and saying, let's start here anyway. There is no perfect moment, no clean slate, just this one right now, and the courage to respond to it. Sometimes that courage looks like launching a business with a borrowed laptop, or going back to school while raising kids, or writing your story with a shaky voice. Sometimes it's forgiving yourself, making a call you've avoided, or saying yes before you feel ready. These are the quiet revolutions, the real beginnings. And they rarely happen under spotlights. They begin when you turn toward your own life with honesty and say, this is where I am, this is what I have, and this is enough to start. Throughout the chapters ahead, you'll be invited to examine your current landscape through new eyes. You'll learn how to identify hidden resources, transform limitations into leverage, and take bold, consistent action toward the life you want to create. This isn't about quick fixes or fake optimism. This is about stewardship over striving. It's about choosing momentum over perfection. And most of all, it's about relearning how to trust yourself. You may feel underqualified. You may feel like everyone else has more to work with than you. But abundance doesn't begin with having more, it begins with seeing more. Seeing the value of your lived experience, seeing the gift in your unique voice, seeing the opportunity hidden inside the problem, seeing the door that appears only after you decide to knock. So wherever you find yourself, at a crossroads, in the middle of a reinvention, or recovering from a setback, this is your invitation. Start where you are. Work with what's in your hands and watch what multiplies. You are not behind. You are not empty. You are not waiting on permission. You're already holding the first piece of the miracle. Now let's get to work. For more information about the ebook version of this audio, check the video description or visit audiobooksoffice.com. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Lack. It is one of the most convincing lies we are ever told, that we don't have enough. From a young age, we are conditioned to measure our worth by what we are missing. The world hands us a checklist. More money, more knowledge, more confidence, more connections, more time. We are subtly and sometimes overtly persuaded to believe that we are always one step short of being qualified, deserving, or ready. This is the illusion of lack. And it is powerful, not because it is true, but because we've rehearsed it for so long, it feels like truth. The illusion of lack is not about actual emptiness. Most of the time, we are not without resources, we are just unaware of them. The mind, when trained to notice what's missing, will ignore what's present. You can have a spark of vision, the support of a few loyal people, a track record of survival and adaptation, and still be convinced that you're behind. Lack is rarely about reality. It is a lens that distorts perception. You see a half-filled room and assume it's empty because your attention has been trained to look for what's not there. This illusion is reinforced by comparison. We do not often measure our lives in solitude. We weigh them against the curated fragments of other people's journeys. We glance sideways and convince ourselves that others have something we don't. More charisma, a better start, a smoother path. What we fail to see are the invisible costs they've paid, the nights they've doubted themselves, the resources they've made look effortless. And even if they do have more in one area, it doesn't cancel out what you already hold. Their abundance is not a threat to yours, but a mirror. The question is never what someone else has. It is, what are you doing with what is already in your hands? Sometimes the illusion of lack doesn't come from comparison, but from delay. We have dreams that require time and effort, but the long process makes us feel like failures. Waiting seasons are especially dangerous to the mind trained in scarcity. You look at what hasn't arrived yet and assume it never will. You interpret silence as disapproval. You confuse stillness with stagnation. But the truth is that life often grows roots before it shows fruit. That job that hasn't opened, that audience that hasn't formed, that breakthrough that hasn't come. None of it means you're lacking. It just means the harvest isn't here yet. And even while you wait, there is still enough to begin. Our culture rarely teaches us to honor the seed. We are infatuated with the end result. We glorify the moment of success, but rarely study the quiet beginnings. No one celebrates the artist who painted for years in obscurity, the entrepreneur who sold products from their trunk, or the teacher who kept showing up to one disengaged student. We see the finished product and forget that every masterpiece started with small tools and uneven steps. If you cannot see value in the small things, you will miss the essence of abundance. Abundance is not about excess. It is about attention. It is the practice of recognizing potential, even in things that don't look like much. The illusion of lack also disguises itself as perfectionism. Perfectionism convinces us that if we don't have everything in place, we shouldn't begin at all. So we rehearse, revise, and retreat. We make our progress conditional on certainty. But the irony is that clarity rarely comes before movement. It comes through movement. You begin, you stumble, you learn, you adjust. And that process reveals what no amount of thinking ever could. Waiting for the right time often just keeps you out of rhythm with your own growth. What if the moment you're in now, as uncertain and unfinished as it feels, is the exact place you're supposed to begin? There is also an emotional component to the illusion of lack shame. Shame whispers that you've already wasted your chances, that too much time has passed, that your mistakes are too heavy, your background too messy, your voice too small. It tells you that even if you tried, no one would care. Shame is a liar, but it speaks with the voice of memory. It borrows moments from your past and replays them as evidence against your future. But the truth is that your life has not disqualified you, it has shaped you. What you've walked through has refined your voice, not ruined it. What you've survived is not your disqualification, it's your credential. When you live under the illusion of lack, you become a collector of excuses. You find evidence for why it's not your time. You rehearse your limitations until they become part of your identity. You turn delayed outcomes into reasons not to act. But deep down, you know you're capable of more. You know that something within you is ready to grow, to stretch, to build. You can feel the friction between who you are and who you are becoming. That friction isn't failure, it's invitation. It's the sound of growth knocking. And the only way forward is to stop looking at what you don't have and start working with what you do. There is no perfect script, no universal checklist. Abundance begins with a mindset shift. You decide that where you are is worthy, that what you have is usable, that who you are is enough to take the next step. This doesn't mean you never grow or acquire more. It simply means you stop waiting for more to validate the starting point. You begin with honesty. You begin with what's real. You begin without all the answers. You begin with what's in your hands. The illusion of lack dissolves in the presence of gratitude and action. When you start noticing what you've already been given, you begin to unlock it. You stop discounting the small ideas. You stop hiding your voice. You stop believing that your starting point is too ordinary to matter. You lean in. You take the risk. You speak up. You launch the project. You apply. You show up. And the moment you do, something shifts. You realize that the very thing you thought was missing has been within reach all along. This is the truth no one teaches loudly enough. You are not behind. You are not unqualified. You are not empty. You are not too late. The illusion of lack is just that, an illusion. And once you stop believing in it, you start building a life that reflects what's been true the whole time. You were never lacking. You were just looking in the wrong direction. Chapter 2. Reframing the present moment. Most people don't realize they are already standing in the place where their next chapter begins. They are so consumed with what's missing or what's ahead that they overlook the value of where they are right now. The present moment often feels too plain, too quiet, too unresolved to be sacred. But the truth is, transformation never begins in the future. It begins right here. It begins with how you choose to see this moment, not the one you're hoping will come. Abundance is not waiting for you in some far-off breakthrough. It's asking for your attention now. When we talk about abundance, people often assume it has to do with outcomes, success, growth, increase, fulfillment. But real abundance is rooted in how you interpret your life. It's less about how much you have and more about how you relate to what you have. The present moment is a mirror. It reflects not only your circumstances, but also your beliefs. Two people can be in the same situation. One sees opportunity, and the other sees limitation. One sees preparation, the other sees punishment. The circumstances haven't changed, only the perspective has. That shift in how you frame your experience is where everything begins. Reframing the present moment doesn't mean denying the difficulties within it. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything is perfect when it's not. Life is layered. Sometimes it's hard, unfair, confusing, and yet even in that tension, something valuable can be found. The work is in learning how to hold both truth and hope in the same hand. Yes, this season may be stretching you. Yes, you may feel like you're not where you thought you'd be by now. But what if this season is equipping you for something you couldn't carry before? What if the friction isn't punishment, but preparation? We are so used to treating the present moment like a waiting room. We sit in it, arms folded, tapping our feet, watching the clock, waiting to be called into the real thing. We say things like, once I get that opportunity, once I make more money, once I figure it all out. And so we live in the delay, convinced that now is just something to endure until better shows up. But if you keep treating now like it's not good enough, you'll miss the invitation it's offering. The present moment is not an obstacle to your future. It's the birthplace of it. Everything you will ever create begins in a single moment of awareness. The awareness to stop and look around and say, this might not be everything, but it's something, and I can do something with it. That awareness is a skill, and it must be developed. It means learning to look at your current job, however temporary or unfulfilling, and ask what skills it's giving you. It means looking at your quiet season of obscurity and realizing it's a space for building depth, not a punishment for not being discovered. It means looking at your struggles and asking what kind of strength they're trying to unlock in you. Your present moment is always speaking. The question is whether you're willing to listen differently. Reframing is about perspective, but it's also about power. When you change how you see the moment you're in, you reclaim the authority to respond to it. You stop feeling like life is just happening to you and start recognizing that you have agency. You have a say in what this moment becomes. You don't have control over everything, but you have the power to choose how you engage with your circumstances. That choice, to engage with purpose instead of passivity, is the first act of building abundance. People often ask, how do I know if it's the right time? The better question is, what can I do with the time I've already been given? It's easy to romanticize the future, to picture a version of yourself who's more equipped, more connected, more confident. But that person doesn't arrive by magic. They're built one decision at a time, decisions made in the present. Waiting for ideal conditions is the fastest way to delay your growth. Nothing becomes ideal until you begin shaping it with intention. The truth is, there is no perfect timing. There is only alignment, when your willingness to act meets your awareness of what you already hold. Sometimes we think we need new tools or a clearer path before we begin. But most of the time, we don't need more tools, we need a new lens. We need to look at the present not as a placeholder, but as a platform. The friendships you have, the wisdom you've gathered, the small wins you've accumulated, they are not insignificant. They are material for your next move. Even the parts you consider flaws or failures can be reframed. That mistake you regret might have taught you discernment. That delay you resented may have protected you from stepping into something you weren't ready for. That season of loss could have carved out space for something more lasting to take root. Reframing doesn't ignore what happened, it just assigns it new meaning. And meaning is everything. People can endure hard seasons when they believe the season is producing something worthwhile. They can keep showing up when they feel like their effort is connected to something bigger, but when the present moment feels meaningless, motivation dries up. That's why reframing is not a luxury, it's a survival skill. It's how you find direction when the road ahead is still forming. It's how you remind yourself that this moment, however incomplete, is still worthy of your full attention. There's a quiet kind of power in choosing to be fully present. It's easy to check out mentally, to wait for the next big thing, to constantly scan the horizon for something better. But being present is an act of rebellion against the belief that now isn't enough. It is a declaration that life is happening now. Not after you're discovered, not after you're promoted, not after everything makes sense. Right now. And what you do with now determines what comes next. Presence doesn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it looks like routine, like discipline, like saying no to distractions so you can build something real. But presence builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. The more you show up for the moment you're in, the more capable you feel, and the more clearly you begin to see possibilities. The fog begins to lift, not because the future changed, but because you became anchored in the only place where life can actually be lived, the present. So pause and look around, not with criticism, not with regret, with curiosity. What's working in your life right now that you haven't acknowledged? What has shown up for you in this season that you haven't fully appreciated? Who is supporting you? What have you learned recently that could serve as a stepping stone? What skills have you refined simply by surviving what you thought would break you? You don't need a better moment. You need better eyes to see this one. Because once you start seeing the present as a partner instead of a prison, you begin to move differently. You begin to build with what you have. You stop resenting your now and start harvesting it. And that shift, that quiet, powerful shift, is how every transformation begins. Not someday, not when, right here, right now. Chapter 3. What's in your hand? Most people spend their lives looking outward for answers, unaware that some of their most important tools are already with them. We are taught to search the horizon for what we think we lack, a new connection, a better opportunity, a perfect idea, without ever pausing to look down at what we're already holding. This chapter is about that pause. It's about noticing what's already in your hands, not metaphorically in the abstract, but literally in your life right now. Your skills, your experiences, your story, your relationships, your resources, those are the raw materials. They may not look like much at first glance. They rarely do. But what you fail to recognize cannot be used, and what you overlook often becomes the very thing someone else will use to build something meaningful. We live in a culture that makes us believe that success comes from getting access to something new, something rare or exceptional. So we chase shiny objects. We think we need to start over. We believe if we just had what that person has, we could finally become who we're meant to be. But often, greatness begins by doing something different with something familiar. It's not that you need more, it's that you need to see differently. Sometimes, the most transformational breakthroughs come not from acquiring new resources, but from reimagining how you can use the ones already available to you. Look around your life. What do you know how to do? What do people come to you for? What conversations light you up? What have you survived? What have you learned, not in a textbook, but in the trenches of real life? These are clues. These are things in your hands. And it's easy to dismiss them because they don't look dramatic or revolutionary. But remember this, what feels ordinary to you might be extraordinary to someone else. We are so close to our own gifts that we often can't see them clearly, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable. There is something incredibly powerful about naming what's in your hands. When you name it, you claim it. You begin to take responsibility for it. You begin to explore how it might be used, how it might grow, how it might become the foundation for something greater. This is not about ego, this is about stewardship. If something has been given to you, an ability, an insight, a resource, it's not random. And if you ignore it because it feels small, you may never discover what it was meant to become. One of the most overlooked assets in your life is your experience. People often downplay what they've walked through, thinking it only counts if it ended in visible success. But every experience you've had, especially the difficult ones, has taught you something. And embedded in that knowledge is wisdom. Wisdom isn't flashy, but it's incredibly valuable. It gives you insight. It makes you a better decision maker. It gives you empathy, depth, and resilience. Your story, no matter how broken or unfinished, is not a liability. It's material. It's something in your hands. Your skills are another piece. Not just the ones you list on a resume, but the ones you use in your daily life. Maybe you know how to organize chaos. Maybe you're a good listener. Maybe you can translate complex things into simple words. Maybe you have a gift for storytelling, or strategy, or encouragement. These are skills even if you've never been paid for them. And if you've spent years using them without acknowledgement, that doesn't make them any less real. In fact, it probably makes you better at them than you realize. Then there are your relationships. These too are part of what's in your hands. Who do you know? Who believes in you? Who challenges you? Who could you learn from or collaborate with? Sometimes a single conversation can open a door. Sometimes just being willing to ask for insight or support can shift your direction entirely. We often think we have to do everything alone, but rarely does anything meaningful get built in isolation. You're not meant to figure it all out by yourself. Part of working with what's in your hands is learning how to invite others into the process. And let's not forget your time. It might not feel like an asset, especially if your life is busy or full of obligations, but how you spend the time you do have matters more than how much time you wish you had. An hour used with focus and intention is more valuable than a full day spent in distraction. Your evenings, your early mornings, your weekends. These are moments that, over time, can build something remarkable. Time, like anything else, grows in value when it's directed with purpose. Often, when people hear the phrase, "what's in your hands," they immediately feel disqualified because they don't feel like they're holding much. Maybe you feel like your hands are empty. Maybe you've lost more than you've gained. Maybe your confidence has been chipped away by failure or rejection or years of being overlooked. But here's the thing, you still have something. You have your voice, you have your choices, you have your perspective. Even if you're starting from scratch, you're not starting from nothing. You're starting with the awareness that something must change, and that awareness is a beginning. Too many people spend their lives waiting to be discovered, instead of discovering themselves. They wait for someone else to tell them they have something worth using. But you don't need a gatekeeper to validate your gifts. You need the courage to use what you already have, and when you do, you begin to multiply it. This is the principle of abundance in action. What you recognize, you can use. What you use, you develop. What you develop, you can offer, and what you offer often comes back to you in ways you never expected. There is no formula for success, but there is a pattern. People who create lives of purpose and impact tend to start with what they have. They don't waste energy wishing for different circumstances. They ask better questions. What's here? What's working? What can I do now? What's possible from this position? They don't wait until they feel ready. They begin. And through the process of beginning, they become ready. It's not about having everything figured out. It's about being willing to take the first step with whatever is already in reach. If you want to move forward in your life, stop waiting for a perfect opportunity and start becoming the kind of person who does something with what they've got. That's where momentum is born. That's where creativity is ignited. That's where confidence is built. Not from pretending to have it all together, but from choosing to engage with your life as it is, not just how you wish it would be. So ask yourself, honestly and without judgment, what's in your hands? What do you know? What have you lived through? What can you create, offer, build, or give from where you are right now? Don't diminish it. Don't apologize for it. Don't wait until it looks impressive. Just begin. Take inventory, get honest, and start with what's already present. Because that's where the story changes. Not in the future, but in this moment, with this version of you, holding exactly what you've got. Chapter 4. The Myth of Readiness. One of the most persistent illusions that keeps people stuck is the belief that they must be ready before they begin. This idea is so subtle and so deeply ingrained that many don't even question it. It shows up in countless forms. Once I feel more confident. Once I have more experience. Once I'm sure of the outcome. Once I get the timing right. And while it sounds responsible, even wise, what it often masks is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, and fear of the unknown. Readiness, as we imagine it, is rarely about preparation. It's about comfort. And growth was never meant to be comfortable. The myth of readiness convinces us that successful people waited until they were completely certain. But in reality, most of them began before they were fully prepared. They launched ideas still taking shape. They spoke before their voices felt strong. They entered rooms where they didn't feel qualified. What separated them was not their level of readiness, but their willingness to move anyway. We see the polished version of their success and assume that's where they started. What we miss are the messy beginnings, the shaky first drafts. the courage it took to act in spite of the doubt. Waiting to be ready becomes the excuse that sounds the most reasonable, which is why it's so dangerous. It disguises passivity as patience. Readiness is not a prerequisite, it's a result. It's what you gain after you begin, not before. The more you act, the more prepared you become. You grow by doing, not by waiting. You learn what works by trying, not theorizing. The very act of stepping forward, of risking the discomfort of uncertainty, is what builds the strength and clarity people believe they need ahead of time. The path reveals itself as you walk it, but you'll never see it while standing still, endlessly planning and perfecting. People often confuse clarity with certainty. They want to be completely sure before they commit, but that's not how transformation works. You don't get the whole picture in advance. You get the first piece. You get a sense, a nudge, a tug at your spirit telling you to move. And when you listen to that nudge, even if it doesn't come with guarantees, something begins to shift. Taking action is an act of faith in yourself and the process. It's trusting that even if the road isn't fully mapped, you're capable of finding your way. The problem with the myth of readiness is that it creates a false finish line. It tells you that if you could just reach a certain point, more knowledge, more time, more resources, then you'd finally start. But that line keeps moving. Every time you inch closer, it shifts just a little further. There's always another book to read, another course to take, another problem to solve first. And so you live in a state of constant preparation but never initiation. The longer you wait, the heavier the fear grows. Eventually, you stop preparing for action and start preparing to delay action more effectively. There's nothing wrong with learning, researching, or strategizing, but preparation must serve movement. It should support your momentum, not replace it. Too often, preparation becomes a hiding place. You convince yourself that if you just do a little more work behind the scenes, then you'll be safe from failure or embarrassment. But perfection isn't protection, it's paralysis. The truth is, there is no version of this journey where you avoid risk. Growth demands exposure. It asks you to show up even when you feel unqualified. It requires you to take the stage even when your hands are trembling. The fear of not being ready often comes from a fear of being seen trying, seen struggling, seen starting small. But every person you admire had to face that moment. They had to be seen in their early stages. They had to endure the awkwardness of beginning, and they had to keep going when it would have been easier to hide. The irony is that readiness doesn't make you immune to doubt. Even when you gain skill and experience, the fear doesn't disappear. You just learn to move with it. You stop waiting for the fear to leave and start learning how to carry it without letting it lead. Another version of the readiness myth is the belief that you need a perfect plan. We crave certainty because it gives us a sense of control, but most of the time the journey ahead can't be predicted in full. Things will change. You'll adapt. Opportunities you never imagined will appear. Plans are useful, but they're not sacred. What's more important than a perfect plan is the willingness to keep adjusting as you go. Resilience matters more than precision. Flexibility matters more than foresight. You don't need to know every step. You need to trust that you'll know what to do with each step as it arrives. It's easy to underestimate how much we can grow through imperfect action. You don't have to start big. You just have to start real. Send the email, make the call, sketch the idea, speak the truth. You don't need to broadcast it to the world if that feels overwhelming. Just take a step that's honest. And then take the next one. Each action will teach you something. It will reveal what needs refining. It will expose what's working. Most importantly, it will shift your identity. The moment you stop waiting and start doing, you stop being someone who dreams and start becoming someone who builds. Sometimes we fear beginning because we're afraid of failing in public, but the truth is most people are not watching as closely as you think, and those who matter most will respect your willingness to take a risk. They will see your action as bravery, not as arrogance. And if you do fail, you'll be stronger for it. You'll learn more from one real attempt than 1,000 imagined scenarios. And when you succeed, even in small ways, it will be because you chose action over weight. You chose presence over perfection. The myth of readiness is just that, a myth. It tells you to delay your life in pursuit of a feeling that may never fully come. But you were not made to live on standby. You were made to move, to build, to try, to create. Readiness is not a doorway you wait to be invited through. It's a door you open yourself. The handle is on your side. The risk is real, but so is the reward. And the moment you step forward, you'll begin to realize that everything you thought you lacked can be built along the way. So don't wait until you're fearless. Don't wait until every doubt disappears. Don't wait until it all makes sense. Start where you are. Speak what you know. Offer what you have. Build with what's in your hands. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are more ready than you think. And the only way to become who you're meant to be is to begin with who you are right now. Chapter 5. Planting Seeds in Imperfect Soil. There is a common misconception that meaningful beginnings require ideal conditions. We often believe that the right soil must be perfectly cultivated before we dare plant anything of value. But life does not work like a laboratory, and growth does not wait for pristine conditions. If you insist on waiting for the soil to be perfect, you will wait forever. The truth is, most good things begin in less than perfect circumstances. The most powerful seeds, ideas, efforts, decisions, commitments, are planted in the dirt of uncertainty, in the mess of transition, in the hard ground of ordinary days. The soil of your life right now may not look like much, but that does not mean it cannot support growth. What matters more than the condition of the soil is the courage to plant something anyway. Too often we withhold our efforts until life feels more stable, until we feel more confident, until the path is clearer. But growth responds to action, not fantasy. You don't need to wait until you've figured it all out. You just need to begin where you are, with what you have, even if it's small, even if it's clumsy. That is how momentum is born. That is how strength is built. Not in the imagining, but in the doing. Every garden begins with someone willing to get their hands dirty. Someone willing to believe that something small can become something meaningful if given the chance. We tend to romanticize the idea of perfect timing. It's comfortable to think that life will send us a clear signal, a shining green light when it's finally time to start. But timing is rarely obvious. It's subtle. It arrives disguised as a nudge, a whisper, an internal unrest that refuses to let you stay where you are. You don't get a guarantee that what you plant will grow exactly as you hoped, but you plant anyway because the greater risk is in never planting at all. There are dreams that die in the soil of hesitation. There are ideas that wither from neglect, not from lack of potential. You do not need certainty to move forward. You need willingness. You need trust. You need to stop analyzing the dirt and start putting something in the ground. Imperfect soil teaches you things perfect soil never could. It teaches you to adapt. It teaches you to be patient. It forces you to be resourceful. When conditions are less than ideal, you pay attention in ways you otherwise wouldn't. You learn how to water with care, how to shield tender beginnings from the elements, how to celebrate small progress. You learn that growth is not always fast or flashy. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's slow, but it is still happening. The seed is doing its work underground long before it pushes through the surface. Waiting for the right conditions becomes a form of procrastination dressed in the clothing of wisdom. It sounds reasonable to say you'll start later, but later is not a real time. It's a vague promise that keeps you at a distance from your own potential. The truth is, now is all you ever really have, not because the present moment is perfect, but because it's available, it's real, it's accessible, and it's the only place anything can ever truly begin. When you plant in imperfect soil, you make peace with reality. You stop waiting for a fantasy and start building something in the world you actually live in. Every meaningful endeavor, every business, every piece of art, every relationship, every transformation began with someone choosing to plant a seed despite the unknowns. They didn't have it all figured out. They didn't know how it would all work. They just knew they had something in their hands that deserved a chance. And so they planted it. They committed to the process. They learned to show up for it, even when they didn't feel inspired, even when it was slow, even when they felt like giving up. They learned that what you plant is only half the story. What really matters is whether you tend to it consistently, especially when nothing seems to be happening. Tending the soil means staying engaged. It means choosing to believe that your efforts matter, even when you don't see immediate results. It means developing habits that nurture growth, rather than waiting on feelings that may never show up. Consistency becomes your sunlight, intention becomes your water, patience becomes your shelter. You keep showing up, not because it's easy, but because you understand that nothing grows without care. There will be days you feel like your labor is invisible, days when progress is impossible to measure. But growth is rarely linear. It happens in quiet spurts, under the surface, often only visible in hindsight. The beauty of planting in imperfect soil is that it sets you free from the illusion of having to get everything right before you begin. You learn that the work itself will teach you how to do the work better, that the act of starting, however small or imperfect, opens doors you couldn't see before. You gain clarity not from waiting but from working. You gain strength not from fantasizing but from your courage compounds. Your skills evolve, and slowly your confidence grows, not because conditions improved, but because you did. What often holds people back is the belief that their effort won't matter, that their small seed won't make a difference. But small is not insignificant. Small is how everything begins. You don't plant a tree, you plant a seed. You don't write a book in a day, you write a sentence. You don't change your life with a single decision, you change it through a series of quiet, steady, committed choices. The work isn't glamorous, but it is sacred. And over time, small seeds planted in faith produce deep roots and strong branches. Not in a week, not on a schedule, but in their season. Your job is not to predict the harvest. Your job is to plant, water, and tend to what you've been given. Your job is to stay faithful to the process. The outcome is shaped by many things, some within your control, some beyond it. But no growth is possible without a beginning. No harvest comes without a planting. The conditions may not be perfect, the timing may not be convenient, but if the desire is there, if the call won't leave you alone, then that is enough. That is your signal. So stop waiting for the soil to look better. Stop trying to predict the weather. Stop analyzing the odds. Choose your seed, name your intention, put it in the ground, show up for it tomorrow and again the next day. Trust the process, not because it's guaranteed to be easy, but because it's yours. Because nothing will ever grow until you plant something real, something honest, something small that dares to live in the soil of now. Chapter 6. Building while walking. One of the hardest truths to accept is that you will not have it all figured out before you begin. You won't know how every detail fits, how every challenge will resolve, or where exactly the road will lead. And yet, the pressure to know everything in advance keeps many people from ever taking a single step. We want certainty before commitment, clarity before action, but life rarely works that way. Most of what is built while walking. You move first and the path reveals itself second. You make a decision, you take a step, and only then do you begin to see the shape of what you're creating. There is no shortcut around this truth. Waiting to feel completely certain before beginning something meaningful will keep you anchored in place. The dream may feel alive in your imagination, but unless it is acted upon, it remains theory. It is only when you begin to walk, when you start to engage with the real world and its unpredictability, that your idea becomes something tangible. There is a reason why the beginning often feels foggy. Clarity is not a precondition for movement, it's often a product of it. And the deeper you walk into the process, the more clearly you start to see what you couldn't have understood from a distance. This reality can feel terrifying at first. The idea that you have to build as you go, that you won't always know what's next, that failure might come before success. None of this fits into the polished version of progress we've been sold. But this is how everything real is made. You can plan and strategize, and you should, but at some point the planning has to end and the building must begin. And once it does, you learn to adapt. You learn to solve problems not just with theory but with courage. You learn to adjust course, to try again, to stay flexible without quitting. You learn how to build trust in yourself, not because you had every answer, but because you didn't let the lack of answers stop you. There's a kind of wisdom that only movement can produce. You can't access it by thinking about the journey, you only get it by taking the journey. When you walk into something new, whether it's a project, a calling, a commitment, or a relationship, you step into an environment where you will be shaped as much as you shape what you're building. That shaping is often uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because growth is not just about creating something external, it's about becoming someone new in the process. You are building the thing, yes, but the thing is also building you. Fear often whispers that if you don't know the whole plan, you shouldn't start. It tells you that missteps mean you're off track, that uncertainty is a sign you've made the wrong choice. But fear is not a reliable narrator. It prefers safety over significance. It will try to convince you to pause indefinitely, to hide behind preparation, to wait until the unknown becomes known. But what if the unknown isn't your enemy? What if it's the space where transformation lives? The truth is, the unknown is where you find new parts of yourself, your creativity, your grit, your voice, your resilience. Those parts don't awaken in safety, they wake up in motion. Building while walking means giving yourself permission to not have every answer. It means accepting that you may look unsure at times, that you may make revisions, that you may have to pivot mid-subject. It means acknowledging that mistakes are not the opposite of progress, they're part of it. Every wrong turn teaches you something right. Every uncomfortable moment sharpens your understanding of what matters most. This is not chaos, this is creation. You don't need to appear flawless while building. You don't have to pretend you have everything under control. People are far more inspired by your willingness to keep moving than by your ability to look polished. Your vulnerability is not a liability, it's a doorway to connection. Others see themselves in your honesty. They recognize their own fears and hopes in your journey, and in witnessing you walk your imperfect path, they find the courage to begin their own. There's something deeply human about watching someone build in real time. Not the final product, not the highlight reel, but the in-between, the trial and error, the showing up, the not knowing but still going. That is where credibility is formed. That is what authenticity lives. And that is what makes your story matter. Not that you reached the summit without struggle, but that you kept climbing when the path disappeared beneath your feet. Some people worry that building while walking will make them look foolish, like they don't know what they're doing. But the truth is, no one knows everything when they begin. Every builder is also a beginner at some point. The difference is that builders keep going. They allow themselves to be seen learning. They stay in the process long enough for clarity to emerge. They trust that the road will rise to meet them, not because it's smooth, but because they're willing to take the next step anyway. Your next step doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to change everything overnight. It just has to be honest. One small decision, one real conversation, one action rooted in intention. That's how momentum begins. And once momentum starts, it creates space for grace. You begin to see new possibilities. You begin to notice options you couldn't see before. The landscape changes as you move, but it only changes because you chose to move. You don't need a perfect blueprint to begin. You need faith that you can handle what comes as you go. You need resilience more than reassurance. You need a deep, grounded belief that your growth is not dependent on getting it all right the first time. It's dependent on showing up again and again, especially when the path is unclear. That is the essence of building while walking. It's not about ease, it's about engagement. It's about being fully present in the process, committed not just to what you're creating, but to who you're becoming in the act of creation. Let go of the need to be flawless. Let go of the pressure to know it all. Let go of the idea that only certainty produces progress. Start walking, start building, start engaging with the world from where you are. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to trust yourself enough to take the next step. Chapter 7. The Silent Assets. There are certain forms of wealth that don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with applause or admiration. They don't show up in your bank account, on your resume, or in any easily measurable form. And because of that, they often go unnoticed, even by the very people who hold them. These are what I call the silent assets. The quiet strengths, the hidden reserves, the internal resources that, when nurtured, have the power to unlock extraordinary change. In a world obsessed with the visible and the external, these internal assets, things like discipline, perspective, gratitude, resilience, and integrity, are often dismissed as soft or secondary. But when life gets hard, when the plan falls apart, when everything else feels uncertain, it's these assets that keep you standing. Gratitude is one of the most underestimated forces available to us. It doesn't always feel powerful because it operates so subtly. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It brings your focus back to what's already working, even in the middle of what's still unfolding. Gratitude doesn't mean you deny difficulty. It means you choose not to be consumed by it. It allows you to see the good, not just when things are going well, but especially when they're not. It turns small wins into sources of strength. It takes the edge off of waiting seasons. It protects your perspective from spiraling into bitterness. Gratitude changes your posture, and your posture changes your possibilities. Discipline is another silent asset, though it rarely receives the credit it deserves. It doesn't sparkle like talent or shine like charisma, but it carries a kind of quiet authority. It doesn't ask for attention, it simply shows up, over and over, even when you're tired, even when motivation is nowhere to be found. Discipline keeps the wheels turning when inspiration has left the room. It builds consistency, and consistency compounds. The person who moves a little every day will go further than the one who waits for perfect conditions to make a giant leap. Discipline makes sure the work gets done. And in time, it turns ordinary efforts into extraordinary results. Then there is perspective, hard-earned, often through difficulty, loss, failure, and time. Perspective doesn't come from theory, it comes from experience, from seeing how things unfold, how challenges evolve, how storms pass. When you've lived through enough, you begin to realize that not everything requires a dramatic response. You begin to carry a calmness that others can sense. You stop panicking at every delay. You stop interpreting every obstacle as a stop sign. Perspective allows you to step back and say, this too is part of the process. It doesn't remove the weight of life, but it does shift how you carry it, and that shift makes a difference. Self-trust may be the most foundational silent asset of all. It's hard to define and even harder to fake. It's built through experience, through showing up for yourself, keeping your promises to yourself, making hard choices even when no one is watching. Self-trust says, even if I don't know exactly how this will go, I believe I'll find my way. It keeps you grounded when outside validation is absent. It helps you navigate seasons when others don't understand your path. It allows you to try, to risk, to stretch, because deep down you believe you'll handle whatever comes. Without self-trust, every decision is paralyzed by self-doubt, but with it, even uncertainty becomes manageable. Humility also belongs in this group. It doesn't call attention to itself, but it creates space for learning and connection. Humility says you don't have to pretend, you don't have to know it all, you don't have to be the best to be valuable. You're allowed to grow, you're allowed to be in process. Humility invites feedback. It allows room for correction without collapse. It keeps your ego in check, which in turn protects your progress. In a world that often equates humility with weakness, it's actually one of the strongest assets you can carry. It keeps you aligned with truth, and truth is always fertile ground for growth. Resilience is another quiet strength. You don't notice it while you're developing it. You only recognize it in hindsight, when you realize that what once broke you now builds you. Resilience isn't loud, it's not about never falling, it's about getting up differently, wiser, softer in some ways, stronger in others. Resilience doesn't make you invincible, it makes you more flexible, more adaptable, more open to trying again. It gives you the ability to look at a mess and say, "This isn't the end." And that belief, that maybe something can still come of this, is what keeps you going when logic tells you to stop. Patience also qualifies as a silent asset, though it's rarely celebrated. We're conditioned to value speed, to chase fast results and quick turnarounds. But most meaningful growth happens over time, and time requires patience. Patience isn't passive, it's active waiting. It's choosing to keep showing up, keep nurturing, keep preparing, even when nothing seems to be changing. It's trusting the process without rushing it. And in that trust, something sacred forms. You begin to appreciate the journey, not just the destination. You begin to see that slow doesn't mean stuck. It means sustainable. It means lasting. It means real. These silent assets may not look like much from the outside. They don't make headlines. They don't impress at a glance, but they're the reason some people keep going when others quit. They're the difference between burning out and breaking through. They are the infrastructure beneath every lasting endeavor. And while they often go unnoticed in seasons of abundance, they become essential in seasons of challenge. If you've made it this far in life, chances are you already carry many of these assets. Maybe you haven't named them. Maybe you haven't fully trusted them. But they're there, in the way you keep showing up, in the way you refuse to let go of your vision, in the way you hold space for hope, even when everything around you says you shouldn't. These inner strengths are not given the way credentials are. They're forged, built through experience, grown in the shadows. They are not glamorous, but they are necessary. What would change if you began to treat these qualities as part of your wealth? What if you measured your readiness not just by your outward resources, but by your internal ones? What if you began to believe that what you carry inside, your integrity, your patience, your capacity to keep going, is not just admirable, but essential to your calling? In a world full of noise, the quiet strength of silent assets offers something steady. You may not be the loudest or the most visible. You may not have the biggest platform or the boldest brand. But if you are building something that matters, something rooted in truth and sustained by consistency, you will need these internal anchors. They are not optional. They are foundational. So before you disqualify yourself for not having the right connections or resources or credentials, look again. Look inward. Inventory the quiet things, the habits no one sees, the values you live by, the mindset you've cultivated, the strength you've earned through staying. These are not just personality traits. They are tools. They are anchors. They are power. You don't need to shout to build something strong. You just need to recognize what's already holding you together and start treating it like the strength it is. Chapter 8. Creativity from Constraints. There's a common belief that creativity thrives in wide open spaces, in total freedom, in endless possibility. We tend to imagine artists, thinkers, and innovators operating in boundless environments, liberated from pressure or limits, pulling ideas out of thin air with ease and inspiration. But in reality, that's not how creativity works for most people. In fact, some of the greatest breakthroughs happen not in the presence of freedom, but in the presence of limitation. It is within constraints, boundaries of time, resources, energy, or space, that creativity often comes alive in its most powerful form. Limitations sharpen our focus, force us to adapt, and push us to explore solutions we never would have considered otherwise. Constraints are not roadblocks, they are invitations. They challenge you to look again, to stretch further, to try a different approach. They narrow your options, but in doing so, they increase your clarity. Instead of overwhelming yourself with endless possibilities, you begin to ask better questions. What can I do with what I already have? What matters most? Where is the opportunity in this limitation? These kinds of questions are catalysts. They shift your energy from frustration to imagination, from waiting for ideal conditions to creating within real ones. We often believe we need more to do something meaningful. More money, more time, more support, more confidence. But what we actually need is a deeper level of engagement with what we've already got. Constraints force that engagement. They make you resourceful. They wake up parts of your brain that comfort often puts to sleep. You start to think differently, move differently, work differently. You become more intentional, you make tighter decisions, you stop chasing perfection and start focusing on impact. History is full of stories where limitations led to innovation. Some of the most iconic creative works, technological advances, and entrepreneurial ideas were born from people who didn't have everything they needed, but who dared to work with what they had. They didn't wait for ideal budgets, perfect timing, or complete certainty. They faced a constraint and decided to treat it as creative fuel rather than as a final verdict. That decision made all the difference. Constraints also develop character. They teach you patience, persistence, humility, and flexibility. When everything comes easily, you never develop the muscle required to pivot, to reimagine, to endure. When things are tight or limited, you learn to work differently. You learn how to simplify without compromising your purpose. You begin to appreciate the art of refinement, cutting what's unnecessary, clarifying your message, focusing on what truly matters. In this way, constraints do not reduce your power, they refine it. The pressure of limitation can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to associating creativity with freedom. But discomfort is not the enemy of creation. In many ways, it's a necessary ingredient. Discomfort pushes you beyond your familiar patterns. It forces you to abandon your autopilot strategies and engage more deeply with the process. You can't coast when things are tight. You can't rely on old methods when the situation demands something new. And so, creativity begins to stretch beyond inspiration. It becomes strategy, problem solving, and a form of leadership. One of the most powerful things a person can learn is how to convert frustration into creativity. It starts with noticing your first impulse when you hit a wall. Do you shut down, delay, complain, or walk away? Or do you pause, ask a better question, and begin exploring alternative paths? Most people have been taught to treat limitations as signs to stop, but those who thrive in the long term learn to treat limitations as signals to innovate. They don't wait for the pressure to ease, they lean into it and ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Or, "What new possibility could this be pointing me toward?" Constraints can also force clarity of vision. When you don't have the luxury to do everything, you're forced to choose what matters most. You stop overcomplicating. You let go of what's unnecessary. You make bold decisions that simplify your direction. Sometimes having less actually helps you create something purer, more focused, and more resonant. Simplicity has a power of its own, and it's often born in seasons when extravagance simply isn't an option. Even emotional constraints can create space for powerful work. Pain, confusion, longing, doubt. These are not enemies of creativity, they can be entry points. Many of the most authentic pieces of writing, art, invention, or service have emerged from people working through their own personal limitations. Emotional honesty is a powerful creative force. It doesn't always look polished, but it's deeply resonant. When you stop trying to create from a perfect place and begin to create from a real one, your work gains depth, soul, and meaning, and that kind of work tends to endure. If you are in a season where things feel tight, restricted, or incomplete, don't assume that means your creativity must be on pause. Look more closely. What are the boundaries teaching you? Where are they pointing you? What can you reimagine inside the box you've been given? You might not have the resources to build everything yet, but you can sketch, prototype, experiment, or start small. The goal is not to eliminate all limitation, it's to learn how to move creatively within it. You may not have all the tools you think you need, but you are not without tools. Your perspective, your experience, your hunger to figure it out. These are resources too. Creativity doesn't always look like invention. Sometimes it looks like repurposing. Sometimes it looks like simplifying. Sometimes it looks like using something familiar in an unfamiliar way. Constraints can push you to create work that is more honest, more grounded, and more connected to real need. The truth is, the world doesn't need more flawless execution. It needs people willing to work with what they have, in the conditions they're in, and to do it with heart. It needs people who see limitation and choose to build anyway. People who don't wait for wide open spaces, but who plant in the cracks of what already exists, and still manage to grow something meaningful. That kind of creativity is not just impressive, it's powerful. Because it's rooted in truth. It knows how to survive, it knows how to adapt, and it knows how to multiply even in the most unlikely environments. So instead of seeing your limitations as reasons to delay or shrink, start seeing them as invitations to think differently. Begin with what's in front of you. Use the tools you already know. Trust the voice inside you that says, "Let's try anyway." That is how real work begins, not in endless freedom, but in the decision to create anyway, especially when conditions are far from perfect. Chapter 9. Honor the small starts. We live in a world that loves the big reveal, the launch, the arrival, the headline moment when everything comes together and the spotlight shines. We celebrate the success story, the finished product, the public breakthrough. But most of life doesn't happen in those moments. Most of life unfolds in smaller, quieter spaces. Those first unglamorous steps when no one is watching, when everything feels uncertain, and when progress is almost invisible. And if we're not careful, we'll begin to believe that small means insignificant, that a beginning without fanfare is a beginning without value. But that is a dangerous lie, because everything meaningful starts small. Everything. A seed is small. A spark is small. A single decision, a one-page idea, a quiet conversation. These are how movements begin. The first draft is rarely impressive, the first day is rarely easy, but beginnings are sacred precisely because they hold potential. They carry the whole future inside them, even if you can't see it yet, even if it feels fragile or incomplete. What you're starting has value, not because it's finite, because it's perfect, but because it's real. And if you don't learn how to honor your small starts, you'll keep walking away from the very thing you were meant to grow. The world will not always reward your beginning. You may not get applause, you may not go viral, you may not see results right away, but that doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It just means you're in the part of the process most people try to skip, the uncomfortable part, the vulnerable part, the part where your effort outweighs your evidence. But it's also the part where your foundation is being built, and without a strong foundation, nothing you build will last. Honoring your small start means you commit to the work before the world commits to watching. It means you show up consistently, not because you're guaranteed results, but because you've chosen to believe the process matters. It takes humility to begin small, to be seen as new or unpolished, to walk into a room and not have all the answers. But humility is not weakness. It's strength under control. It's the willingness to be in process, to keep learning, to keep going even when it's awkward or unrewarded. The ego wants instant recognition, but wisdom knows the value of patience. Growth that lasts is almost always slow. Past wins often fade just as quickly, but slow, steady work, done with intention, done with heart, has the power to endure. If you can fall in love with a small start, you'll build the kind of endurance that most people never reach. The small start is also a test of alignment. It forces you to ask yourself why you're doing this in the first place. Is it for applause, or is it for purpose? Are you in this to be seen, or are you in this to serve, to solve, to create something real? When the stage is small and the feedback is limited, your motivation gets exposed. But that's not a bad thing. That clarity will serve you. It will help you build a vision that is rooted in something deeper than validation. And anything built on depth, not hype, has a better chance of standing the test of time. There is something beautiful about starting small when you lean into it fully. It gives you room to experiment, to find your voice, to make mistakes without the pressure of a spotlight. It allows you to grow at a sustainable pace, to discover what matters to you, and to build your skills with integrity. Don't waste that season wishing it away. Use it, explore, try, learn, fail forward. You'll never get this version of the beginning back. One day you may long for the freedom you have now, the freedom to evolve without expectation, the space to stretch without scrutiny. People often overlook the small start because they think it doesn't count until it's recognized. But the most important work often begins in obscurity. It begins in quiet consistency. It begins when you choose to treat your effort like it matters, even when no one else sees it yet. The most impactful people in the world are not necessarily the most talented or the most connected. They're often the ones who refused to give up when it was still small. They stayed committed when it wasn't convenient. They kept building when no one was clapping. And because they honored the beginning grew into something powerful. It's easy to compare your small start to someone else's middle, but that comparison will always leave you discouraged. You cannot measure your progress by looking at someone further along. Their pace is not your pace. Their path is not your path. Their story has different chapters. You don't know what they had to sacrifice, what they had to overcome, what they had to walk through to reach where they are now, and you don't know what kind of internal work they're still doing behind the scenes. Focus on your own growth. Focus on your own rhythm. If it's growing, it's working. Even if it's growing slow, you have nothing to prove by rushing. There is no award for burning out. The work that matters will take time. It will stretch you. It will test you. But it will also shape you. And that shaping is part of the gift. You're not just building a product, a platform, a business, a body of work. You're building a version of yourself who knows how to stay when it's hard, who knows how to begin without permission, who knows how to find joy in the process. That version of you will carry strength into every future chapter. Honor the small. Start by naming it. Write it down. Claim it. Don't minimize it in conversation. Don't apologize for it. Don't disown it when it doesn't look impressive. This is your foundation. Treat it like it matters, because it does. Water it with discipline. Protect it with focus. Feed it with gratitude. Your job is not to guarantee the outcome. Your job is to keep showing up for the seed you planted, to believe in the value of what you're building even when it's not yet visible to others. So begin again if you must, and begin small if that's what you have. But don't confuse small with powerless. Don't mistake quiet with meaningless. Don't wait until it looks big to act like it's worthy. The beginning matters. The work you do now, in the quiet, in the hidden, in the honest and imperfect hours, is not wasted. It is setting the stage for everything that will come. And the more you honor it, the more it will grow, not just in size, but in strength, in depth, in impact. Chapter 10. Becoming a steward of the now. It's easy to romanticize the future, to imagine that the best version of life is waiting somewhere ahead of us, waiting for the right conditions, the right breakthrough, the right moment of luck or opportunity. We imagine a someday when we'll finally be ready, finally have enough, finally be able to live fully and move confidently. The problem with that mindset is that it quietly dismisses the importance of the present. It turns now into a placeholder, something to get through instead of something to be trusted with. But the present is not a rehearsal. It is the stage. It's not a warm-up for your real life. It is your life. And the way you treat the now determines what kind of future you're building. Becoming a steward of the now means you begin to see this moment, not the next one, as your place of power. It means you stop waiting and start working with what's in front of you. Stewardship is about care. It's about management. It's about attention and responsibility. It's the act of looking at the time, energy, relationships, opportunities, and resources currently in your hands and choosing to treat them with value. You don't dismiss them because they're small. You don't ignore them because they're not ideal. You show up. You engage. You decide that the present deserves your best effort, not your leftover attention. Most people don't realize they are already in possession of the material needed to build the next layer of their life. It may not be complete, it may not look like what they envisioned, but it's real, and what's real can be worked with. The job that feels beneath your potential, the apartment that's smaller than you'd like, the audience that's still forming, the platform that feels too quiet, these are not voids. They are classrooms. They are assignments. And the way you treat them determines whether or not you're ready for more. The future doesn't come only when you dream big. It comes when you show up for the small with consistency and intention. Stewarding the now also means becoming trustworthy with the invisible things. Your attitude, your attention, your habits, your follow-through. These are things no one may ever compliment you for, but they form the foundation of your capacity. If you can't be focused with 5 minutes, how will you manage an hour? If you can't be present with one person, how will you connect with 100? If you can't honor your word to yourself, how will you carry the weight of a bigger responsibility? The present is your training ground, your proving ground, and your launch pad, but it only works if you respect it enough to give it your best. There's a difference between movement and momentum. Movement is activity, momentum is progress. You can be busy and still be drifting, but when you begin to steward the now, you build alignment. You make sure that your activity is connected to purpose, that your effort is building something, not just filling time. That kind of focused attention creates compound impact. It means your days don't blur together because they're infused with clarity. And over time, even ordinary actions take on extraordinary weight. One of the most overlooked aspects of stewardship is preparation. Not in the sense of waiting, but in the sense of readiness. When you steward the now well, you prepare for what hasn't come yet by making sure your present is solid. You lay down routines, develop discipline, strengthen character. You build capacity to hold more. Not just more success, but more responsibility, more complexity, more depth. Most people want the next level, but haven't prepared their lives to receive it. Stewardship bridges that gap. It says, let me be faithful with what I have so that I can hold what's coming. Stewardship also transforms how you handle discouragement. When things don't go as planned, when growth feels slow, when recognition is missing, the temptation is to check out, to go on autopilot, to treat the present as punishment. But stewardship says, even this moment is worth something. It teaches you how to work with disappointment without letting it define you, how to keep showing up even when the timeline has stretched further than you hoped. That's not blind optimism, that's maturity, and maturity will take you places that talent alone never could. When you learn to steward the now, you begin to pay closer attention to the details. The conversations you're having, the quality of your work, the way you talk to yourself, the tone you bring into your home, your workplace, your creative process. All of it matters. It's not about becoming obsessive, it's about becoming intentional. Life doesn't shift all at once. It shifts incrementally, quietly, in response to the weight and care you bring to the small things. When you treat the present like it matters, it begins to produce fruit you didn't expect. Some people spend their whole lives chasing the next season, only to realize they never fully lived the one they were in. They were always preparing, always deferring, always waiting. They mistook arrival for fulfillment and missed the joy of building. They waited for meaning to show up instead of creating it with their hands and time and heart. But the people who create deep, lasting lives don't wait for purpose to be handed to them. They bring purpose to what they're already doing. They decide that this moment, this meeting, this meal this morning is worthy of care. Stewardship is not about being perfect, it's about being present. It's about not rushing through the now to get to the next. It's about learning to love the process, not just the payoff. That kind of presence creates an atmosphere around your life. It creates a pace, a rhythm, a kind of gravity that attracts alignment. People begin to sense your steadiness. Opportunities begin to stick, and your life begins to feel cohesive. Not because you are engaged, you're not scattered, you're not asleep, you're not living in some day, you're living here. The best way to honor your future is to take excellent care of your now, to make decisions today that your future self will thank you for, to use your time wisely, to tend to your relationships, to nurture your creativity, to speak with integrity, to protect your peace, to get clear on your values and live them now, not later. When you treat the present like preparation, like purpose, like gift, the future doesn't need to be chased. It grows naturally from the foundation you're building right now. So don't underestimate where you are. Don't rush through it. Don't belittle the work just because it isn't flashy yet. This is the moment you have. This is the space where your roots go deep. This is the season where the unseen work becomes strength. What you do with this day, this opportunity, this interaction, it matters. Be a steward of the now, and let the future rise from the care you give to the present. Chapter 11. The courage to be seen, starting small. There is a certain kind of vulnerability that comes with beginning. Not just beginning quietly on your own, but beginning in view of others. Starting something new while people are watching, even if only a few are paying attention, can stir up fear in ways we don't always expect. The fear of looking unqualified, the fear of being judged, the fear of being misunderstood. These fears don't just slow people down, they stop them entirely. And one of the deepest fears is not that we'll fail privately, but that we'll fail publicly, with nothing to hide behind and no way to control the narrative. Starting small is difficult enough. Being seen starting small requires real courage. There is nothing glamorous about the early stages of building something. Whether it's a project, a business, a creative work, or a new direction in life, the beginning often looks more like stumbling than succeeding. There are awkward conversations, half-formed ideas, shaky confidence, and more trial and error than most people are comfortable admitting. In a world that rewards polish and results, the early steps rarely feel like enough. That's why so many people wait. They wait until they can present something impressive, until they have a perfect pitch, a finished product, a long list of accomplishments. But the danger in waiting is that the desire begins to fade. The energy that wanted to move forward gets buried under layers of perfectionism and fear. To be seen starting small is to reject the myth that you must be fully formed before you are valuable. It's to stand in the tension between your current reality and your future vision and say, "This is where I am, and I'm not ashamed of it." That kind of honesty takes strength, it takes self-respect, and it takes a willingness to tell the truth about your journey, even when that truth isn't impressive by the world's standards. The people who make a lasting impact are rarely the ones who waited until everything was in place. They are the ones who had the courage to begin while they were still figuring it out. Most people want the reward of progress without the exposure of the process. They want the respect that comes after the climb without having to be seen taking the first awkward steps. But visibility is not the enemy. Being seen in your early stages doesn't diminish your credibility, it builds it. It tells the truth. It says, I care more about growing than appearing perfect. I care more about becoming than impressing. That level of authenticity resonates with people in ways that polish never will. Because deep down, we all know what it feels like to start small. We all know what it means to try before you're sure. Every person you admire started somewhere unimpressive. They weren't always confident. They weren't always in demand. They weren't always successful. They began in rooms where no one knew their name. They wrote drafts that were never published. They launched ideas that flopped. They posted content that no one noticed. And through it all, they kept showing up. They didn't let the fear of being seen stop them from building what mattered. They didn't wait for applause. They did the work anyway. And eventually that consistency became credibility. It's tempting to hide the early stages, to only share once things are smooth, to pretend it all came together quickly and cleanly. But there's real power in being seen while you're still building. It allows others to walk with you, not just admire you. It builds connection, not just admiration. And it teaches you that your value isn't tied to the size of your audience, the scale of your work, or the speed of your progress. Your value is present in every step, especially the ones that feel the least glamorous. Being seen, starting small, also means being open to misunderstanding. Not everyone will get your vision in the early days. Some may question your decision to begin. Others may judge your pace or your methods. But your job is not to be universally understood. Your job is to stay true to what you're building. Let the work speak. Let the growth unfold. You don't owe anyone a perfect performance. You owe yourself the dignity of trying. If you keep waiting for full approval before you begin, you may never begin at all. The truth is, people are watching anyway. Whether you try to control it or not, whether you share it or not, your life is visible to someone. And in being seen, starting small, you give permission. You show others that it's okay to be in process. That it's okay to begin from where they are, that it's okay to not have it all together. Your courage becomes contagious. Your honesty becomes a bridge. You make it safer for others to honor their own beginning. Sometimes the hardest person to be seen by is yourself. You carry expectations of where you think you should be by now. You measure your worth against timelines and checklists. You punish yourself for not being further along, but shame will never fuel your progress. It will only shrink your presence. The real work is in choosing to see yourself clearly, to name your start without minimizing it, to honor your desire to grow, to be gentle with your pace. You don't need to rush. You need to respect your process. Start small. Start real. Let yourself be seen. Share the messy middle if you want to. Share the quiet wins. Share the honest questions. And when people show up to witness that version of your story, don't brush it off or apologize for it. That's the real story. That's the version that will matter most in the long run. Not the highlight reel, but the moments you chose to show up before the outcome was certain. There will always be people who don't understand. There will always be voices telling you to wait, to polish, to hide. But you don't answer to those voices. You answer to the truth inside you that says, this matters enough to begin. That voice is the one you follow. That voice is the one you protect. And that voice is the one that will guide you past the fear of being seen, into the freedom of building something that's real. You are not too early. You are not too small. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to take the next honest step. And if you have the courage to take that step where others can see, you'll find that visibility isn't your enemy. It's part of the gift, part of the work, part of the story worth telling. Chapter 12. Faith in the middle. There's something uniquely difficult about the middle. It is not the rush of the beginning when everything feels fresh and full of possibility, nor is it the satisfaction of the end when results begin to show and momentum is visible. The middle is where things often feel the most uncertain. You've started something, you've committed to a vision, you've taken steps forward, but the payoff hasn't come yet. The feedback is quiet, the energy fluctuates, the progress is slow, sometimes invisible. The middle is where doubt sneaks in, not with a loud bang, but with a quiet whisper. Is this even working? The middle tests you in ways the beginning never could. In the beginning, you're fueled by excitement and hope. Everything feels alive, full of potential. But as time passes and effort piles up without the reward you expected, it's easy to wonder if you missed something. You start to second-guess yourself. You start to scan for signs that you're on the right track. When the signs don't show up on schedule, discouragement follows close behind. That's when the temptation to abandon the process becomes loud. But the middle isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a necessary passage. And the only way through is forward. Faith in the middle doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means choosing to believe that something is happening beneath the surface, even when you can't see it yet. It means anchoring yourself not in emotion, which fluctuates, but in conviction, which holds steady. Faith says, I will keep showing up. I will keep building. I will keep believing in the value of this work, even when the evidence is still catching up. This kind of faith is not naive. It is disciplined. It is quiet. It doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It draws its strength from commitment, not from outcomes. The middle is where you decide what you actually believe. It's easy to believe when things are going well, but belief that only lives in comfort isn't belief, it's convenience. Real belief shows up when the results are delayed, when the numbers are low, when the applause is missing, when the doubts are louder than the affirmations. Faith in the middle is not a feeling you wait to have. It's a choice you make again and again. It's the decision to keep watering the soil even when you haven't seen a sprout in weeks. The difficult thing about the middle is that it's rarely celebrated. People cheer when you start and when you finish, but the in-between is often ignored. Yet it's in the middle that character is built. Endurance is forged. Perspective is shaped. The middle is where you learn to sustain what you once only knew how to spark. It's where you build the capacity to carry what you're creating, and that capacity is often more important than the creation itself. Because if you don't grow in the middle, you won't be able to hold what's waiting at the end. There will be days in the middle when everything in you wants to turn back, when you question why you even started, when the thought of continuing feels exhausting. But those are not signs to quit. They are signs to pause, to rest, to reconnect with your why. They are moments that call you back to your foundation. What did you see when you began? What were you hoping to build? Who were you becoming in the process? The middle may blur your vision, but it can't erase your intention unless you let it. It's okay to slow down in the middle. Progress doesn't always look like forward motion. Sometimes progress is just refusing to go backward. Sometimes it's holding your ground when everything feels shaky. Sometimes it's simply showing up again, even if your steps are small. The middle teaches you that consistency is a form of faith, that repetition is not failure, it's reinforcement. Every time you choose to keep going, you send a message to yourself. This matters. I'm not done yet. I believe something is growing, even if I can't see it. The middle is not just where the work continues, it's where the transformation deepens. You begin to let go of needing immediate proof. You stop clinging to timelines. You learn to live in the tension between vision and reality. And in that tension, something strong is formed inside you. Not just stronger work, but a stronger self. Someone who doesn't just create, but who knows how to carry the weight of someone who knows how to stand firm when everything is uncertain. Someone who understands that the middle isn't punishment, it's preparation. Faith in the middle is also about trust. Not just trust in yourself, but trust in the process. Trust that doing the right thing matters, even when no one is watching. Trust that showing up with integrity is never wasted. Trust that the energy you're pouring into your work, your relationships, your growth, none of it is in vain. The outcomes may not arrive on your preferred schedule, but that doesn't mean they're not coming. Growth takes time, depth takes time, mastery takes time, and the middle is where that time is invested. The world moves fast, but meaningful work doesn't always follow that pace. Deep work, soulful work, legacy work, it unfolds at its own rhythm, and that rhythm often includes long stretches of waiting, refining, and persevering. The middle may not offer the thrill of a new beginning or the satisfaction of a triumphant ending, but it offers something else: strength. Not the kind that's loud or flashy, but the kind that lasts, the kind that holds you steady when everything else feels uncertain. If you're in the middle right now, you're not alone. This place is crowded with quiet builders, with people who are doing the work behind the scenes, who are fighting through fatigue, who are holding on to hope without needing to be seen. These people may not be visible yet, but they are present. They are your people, and they know the courage it takes to keep walking through the middle when it would be easier to give up. Your job is not to rush through the middle. Your job is to remain in it with grace, to learn from it, to let it teach you what you can't learn anywhere else, to develop the strength that can't be formed in ease, to become the person who can sustain what's on the other side. The middle is not wasted time, it is formative time. And your faith in this stretch, your willingness to continue, your choice to believe, will shape everything that comes after. So breathe, recommit, keep going. Trust that your quiet progress is building something sturdy and true. And remember, faith in the middle is not about ignoring how far you have to go. It's about honoring how far you've already come and choosing to believe that you're still on your way. Chapter 13, Letting Go to Receive. There is a point on every path where moving forward requires more than effort. It requires release, not more doing, not more striving, not more planning, but letting go. Letting go of the weight you didn't realize you were carrying, letting go of the roles you thought you had to play, letting go of the version of life you imagined but never actually lived. This is one of the paradoxes of growth. Before you can receive more, you often have to surrender something you've been holding on to. The letting go may not make immediate sense, and it may not feel easy, but it is often the clearing that allows something new to arrive. We carry so much without questioning its purpose. We carry outdated beliefs about what success must look like, who we're supposed to be, what we think we must achieve in order to feel worthy. We hold on to timelines that were never ours, expectations we inherited rather than chose, goals that once made sense but no longer speak to our hearts. We grip routines, relationships, responsibilities, and identities not because they're healthy or fulfilling, but because they're familiar. And that familiarity creates a false sense of safety. But what is familiar isn't always what is right. Letting go is not a passive act. It's not quitting. It's not failure. It's not weakness. Letting go is one of the most intentional things you can do. It's a conscious decision to release what no longer serves your future, to unclench your grip on what is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. It is a bold act of faith, a declaration that you believe there is something more aligned, more meaningful, more true, waiting to take the place of what you're surrendering. But first, you must create the space for it. The hardest part about letting go is not always the loss of the thing itself, but the fear of what will fill the space it leaves behind. We are creatures of habit, drawn to patterns, even if they hurt us. A job that drains you still offers structure. A relationship that confuses you still offers connection. A habit that limits you still offers a sense of control. To release any of that is to face the uncertainty of what might come next. And that's what makes letting go such a deeply personal act of courage. It's the willingness to trust the unknown more than the comfort of what you've outgrown. Letting go requires honesty. It demands that you look at what you're holding and ask, is this still mine? Is this still true? Is this still taking me where I want to go? These are not easy questions. They reveal what we've been avoiding, They shine a light on attachments we may have outgrown but haven't yet acknowledged. And when the answer is no, the next step isn't always immediate action. Sometimes the letting go begins quietly, in your mind, in your heart, in the way you begin to shift your attention away from what used to matter and toward what's now asking for your energy. There is grief in letting go, even when the thing being released is no longer right for you. We grieve not only what was, but what could have been. We grieve the version of ourselves that once believed this path would work, and we must give ourselves the grace to feel that grief, to honor it, to let it pass through us without trying to rush it away, because on the other side of that grief is clarity, a deeper knowing, a cleaner sense of self, and eventually a renewed openness to receive. Receiving is not something you force, it's something you prepare for, it's something you allow, and you cannot receive what's next if your hands are full of what used to be. That doesn't mean the past didn't matter. It means it served its purpose. You learned from it, you grew through it, and now to fully step into the next chapter, you must create room for it. Letting go is how you make space for new ideas, new relationships, new opportunities, for a lighter way of moving through life, for the version of you that is no longer bound by outdated attachments. It's important to recognize that not everything you need to let go of is external. Sometimes the deeper work is internal. Letting go of perfectionism, letting go of resentment, letting go of guilt for not being further along, letting go of the pressure to prove yourself. These internal weights are often heavier than any job or relationship, and they are more subtle. But once you begin to release them, you begin to feel something shift. Not just in your circumstances, but in your pot. You stop moving through life burdened. You begin to move freely. There's no perfect timing for letting go. You'll rarely feel completely ready. But readiness is not the point. Willingness is. The willingness to trust that what you release will be replaced by something better suited to who you are now. The willingness to believe that clarity and peace are worth more than the comfort of the familiar. The willingness to face the temporary discomfort of change in order to make space for long-term growth. That kind of willingness reshapes your entire life, not immediately, but steadily. The more you practice letting go, the less attached you become to false definitions of success. You begin to realize that your worth is not tied to what you hold, achieve, or accumulate. Your worth is inherent. And when you know that, you can begin to move through life with less fear. You don't need to hold so tightly. You don't need to overperform to stay relevant. You don't need to cling to things out of fear they'll leave. You are grounded. And from that grounding, you can receive not just things, but clarity, peace, joy, inspiration. Not because you chased them, but because you made space for them. There is nothing weak about letting go. It is not a sign of giving up. It is a sign of growing up. It says, I no longer define myself by what I've outgrown. I choose to release it so I can walk lighter, breathe deeper, and move more fully into who I was always meant to be. That is not loss. That is gain. That is alignment. That is freedom. So ask yourself, gently but honestly, what are you still holding that you no longer need? What are you gripping out of fear, guilt, or habit? What would it feel like to release it? Not all at once, but one layer at a time. Start there. Make space, trust the process, and know that the letting go is not the end of something. It's the beginning of what's been waiting to find you. Chapter 14. Multiplying what you have. Multiplication does not begin with abundance. It begins with attention. It begins with the choice to look at what you already have. Your resources, your skills, your relationships, your time, your voice, and ask, what can I do with this? Too often people assume they need more in order to begin. More money, more experience, more confidence, more clarity. They look at what's in their hands and dismiss it as too small, too basic, too early. But what they overlook is the power of stewardship. What is nurtured can grow. What is honored can expand. What is shared can return multiplied. The secret to increase lies not in accumulation, but in activation. Multiplying what you have is not about pushing harder. It is not about doing more for the sake of doing. It is about using what you already possess in a way that brings value beyond its current appearance. One of the most powerful ways to multiply your gifts is through contribution. When you begin to offer what you have to others, to serve, to solve, to support, you tap into a principle that transcends basic productivity. Generosity multiplies, not always instantly, not always in the ways you expect, but it creates movement. It starts a ripple. What you give has a way of coming back in forms you couldn't have planned. We live in a culture obsessed with the idea of scaling, bigger platforms, wider reach, faster growth. But before scale comes intention, and before intention comes clarity. What are you multiplying for? Why do you want more? More what and for what purpose? When you are clear about your values, your growth becomes aligned. Multiplication is not just about numbers, it's about impact, it's about depth, it's about ensuring that what's growing is actually what you want to sustain. Otherwise, you may find yourself succeeding in a direction that no longer resonates with your soul. Multiplying what you have also means being creative with your resources. If you only ever see things for what they are, you'll miss what they could become. That old idea you once abandoned, could it be refined? That small platform you feel embarrassed about, could it be deepened through consistency and honesty? That one connection you've underutilized, could it spark something new if nurtured intentionally? Multiplication often begins not with external opportunities, but with a shift in how you see what's already present. Your life is already full of seeds. The question is whether you're tending to them. Your voice is a tool of multiplication. Every time you share a story, every time you offer encouragement, every time you speak truth into a situation or hold space for someone to feel seen, you are multiplying your influence. And influence isn't about fame. It's about resonance. It's about the ability to leave someone better than you found them. That kind of impact doesn't require a stage. It doesn't require a massive following. It requires presence, intention, a willingness to show up and share something real. The more you do, the more your voice strengthens, and a strong voice has the power to open doors you never could have forced open through effort alone. Another way to multiply what you have is through collaboration. Too often people isolate themselves, trying to carry everything alone. But what if someone else is carrying a piece of what you need? And what if you have a piece of what they need? Working together doesn't dilute your value, it expands it. When you combine gifts, when you bring different perspectives to the same table, when you choose connection over competition, you create something that couldn't exist alone. And in the process, your influence grows. Not because you claimed more for yourself, but because you contributed to something larger than yourself. Energy multiplies through alignment. When you're doing work that reflects your values, when you're engaged in meaningful effort, when your tasks are in harmony with your intentions, you move with greater clarity and effectiveness. You stop wasting energy on things that drain you, and you begin investing it in places that return peace, fulfillment, and momentum. Multiplying what you have starts with directing your energy where it matters most. And sometimes that means saying no to good things, so you can say yes to the right things. Don't overlook the power of consistency. Multiplication doesn't always happen in dramatic moments. It happens through repetition, through showing up, through building one small layer at a time. A single effort may not yield visible results, but 100 of those efforts stacked together begin to shift the landscape. The podcast that grows by 10 listeners a week, the savings account that grows by a few dollars at a time. The relationship that deepens through steady presence. None of it is flashy, but all of it is real. And over time, those layers multiply into something meaningful. Multiplying what you have also requires protecting what you have. Energy leaks when your boundaries are unclear. Vision fades when your focus is fractured. Potential gets scattered when you say yes to things that aren't aligned with your purpose. Guard your time. Guard your peace. Guard your attention. What you protect becomes stronger. What you nourish becomes fertile. You don't have to do everything. You just have to do the right things with care. Imposter syndrome is one of the biggest barriers to multiplication. When you don't believe what you have is valuable, you won't use it fully. You'll hide, you'll hesitate, you'll shrink your effort to match your doubt. But the truth is, value is not always obvious at first. Sometimes what feels small to you is significant to someone else. Sometimes your simple insight is exactly what someone else needed to hear. Stop waiting until you feel fully confident to begin sharing. Start where you are, with what you know, and let the process of doing build the belief you think you need to have before starting. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people willing to engage honestly with what they already carry. You don't need a massive platform to be influential. You don't need a massive following to make an impact. You need clarity, you need courage, and you need the discipline to multiply what's already in your hands. Whether that's a story, a service, a skill, or a perspective, if it's true and it's helpful, it can grow. And when it grows, it not only lifts you, it lifts others too. So pause and look around. What are you already carrying that you've overlooked? What are you doing well that you've under-celebrated? What could you do more intentionally that would begin to compound with time and care? What could you give, contribute, share, or build that might begin to expand if you stopped waiting for it to feel more impressive? Multiplication doesn't come from waiting for more. It comes from using what you already have with purpose. Start there. Start now. That is where the miracle begins. Chapter 15. The compound interest of action. We tend to measure progress in bursts. We look for breakthroughs, dramatic leaps, sudden transformations. We celebrate the moment the results finally show, as if that single moment defines the journey. But real progress is rarely explosive. More often it is quiet, gradual, almost invisible, until it suddenly becomes undeniable. It is built not on one massive effort, but on the accumulation of small, consistent actions over time. Just like compound interest in finance, the compound interest of action turns little choices into lasting change, not by their size, but by their repetition. One of the greatest misunderstandings about success is the belief that it hinges on inspiration. People wait to feel ready, to feel motivated, to feel a sense of certainty before they act. But waiting for inspiration is like waiting for lightning. You may catch it now and then, but it's unreliable. What truly moves a life forward is consistency. The small choice to show up again, the decision to do what matters even when no one is watching, the choice to take the next step, even if it's not the most impressive one. These small actions, compounded over weeks, months, and years, become the force that shifts the course of your life. You don't need giant wins every day. What you need are meaningful habits, daily disciplines, intentional choices repeated until they become part of your rhythm. These are the actions that don't often get applause, but they build the infrastructure that success stands on. Writing 1 page a day may not seem like much, but in a year you have a book. Saving a small amount each month may not feel like wealth, but in time it creates security. Speaking kindly to yourself each morning may feel small, but over time it rewires your mindset and changes how you engage with the world. The point is not to overwhelm yourself with grand gestures, but to honor the small steps that build something lasting. Consistency does something that motivation alone can't. It builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you keep your word to yourself, every time you follow through, you strengthen your inner confidence. You begin to believe that you are capable, that you are reliable, that you can handle what you've committed to. That kind of self-trust doesn't come from hype or emotional high. It comes from repetition, from proving to yourself in small but steady ways that you can show up for your own life. There will be days when the action feels pointless, days when the effort feels unrewarded, days when it seems like nothing is changing. That's the tricky part about compounding. Its results often show up long after the work has been done. The seeds you plant today may not bloom for months. The habits you build may not shift your outcomes right away. But that does not mean they're not working. Growth is often silent, transformation is often slow, but when it arrives with force, and the people who stayed consistent are the ones who get to see it unfold. It's easy to underestimate the value of incremental improvement. We want to be extraordinary, we want to rise above the average, but excellence is built on mastery of the basics. The best performers in any field are not necessarily doing radically different things. They're doing the right things, consistently, with intention. They've learned how to return to the fundamentals, how to refine small details, how to keep showing up when the novelty wears off. That discipline is what separates temporary bursts of success from sustainable growth. The compound interest of action also applies to your character. Every time you choose integrity, every time you tell the truth, every time you act with kindness, you shape the kind of person you are becoming. These choices may not seem impactful in isolation, but over time they create a reputation, a presence, a legacy. You become known for who you are, not just what you do. And that kind of identity can't be manufactured overnight. It is built one decision at a time. When people talk about wanting a breakthrough, what they often mean is they want a shortcut. They want the results without the repetition, but breakthroughs don't usually come to those who chase quick wins. They come to those who are faithful in the middle. The ones who do the work even when the reward is unclear. The ones who understand that a breakthrough is not a lightning strike. It's the tipping point of hundreds of unseen moments of action that finally reach critical mass. It's not magic, it's math, and it rewards those who stay in the process. There is something deeply empowering about taking small action. It reminds you that you're not powerless, that you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight, that you can begin with what's within reach. One change to your morning routine, 1 hour reclaimed from distraction, one honest conversation you've been avoiding, one step toward the goal you keep pushing aside. It all counts. And the more you practice small, intentional action, the more natural it becomes. It becomes your way of being, your new default, your rhythm of forward movement. This mindset also brings grace. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. Missed a day, start again. Lost focus for a week, begin again. The goal is not uninterrupted progress. The goal is to keep coming back to the work that matters, to keep choosing your future over your feelings, to keep investing in who you want to become, even when the path feels slow. Momentum is not the absence of mistakes, it's the refusal to quit. You may not feel like your actions today are changing anything, but they are. You are becoming something. Whether you realize it or not, the energy you put out is building shape. The work you're doing is laying down a path. The compound interest of action is accumulating, quietly, powerfully, faithfully. And one day when you look back, you'll realize that what felt like nothing was actually everything. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You don't need to feel extraordinary. You don't need to see immediate results. You just need to act, and then act again, and then keep acting until the work becomes part of who you are. The life you want is not built in one leap. It is built in the thousands of small steps you take when no one's watching, when the future feels uncertain, and when all you have is the choice to try again. So try again, choose again, act again, start where you are, keep moving forward, and let the compound interest of your steady, imperfect, persistent action carry you towards something bigger than you ever imagined. Chapter 16. Living from Overflow. There comes a point in the journey when what once felt like effort begins to feel like expression, where the things you once had to force now flow naturally, where the strength you developed through discipline becomes your default way of being, where the work you do and the way you live are no longer about striving to become someone else, but simply about embodying who you've become. This is what it means to live from overflow, not from lack, not from pressure, not from the need to prove or chase or constantly catch up, but from a deep place of internal fullness that spills outward into everything you do. Living from overflow doesn't mean your life is perfect. It doesn't mean you never face challenges or feel doubt or encounter resistance. It means that your well is no longer empty. You are no longer running on fumes. You are no longer trying to build from a place of constant depletion. You've done the internal work. You've made the quiet decisions. You've taken the small steps, faced the discomfort, kept your promises to yourself, and allowed your inner life to become a priority. And now, rather than scraping for motivation or begging for clarity, you operate from a place of steady strength. Overflow is not the result of excess, it is the result of alignment. When your values, your actions, and your rhythm are in harmony, you stop leaking energy. You begin to move with clarity, not confusion. You know what to say yes to and what to walk away from. You stop outsourcing your worth to other people's opinions. You stop attaching your peace to outcomes. You begin to lead your life instead of reacting to it. This shift is not dramatic, it's subtle, but it changes everything. Your presence changes, your pace changes, your posture changes. You're no longer chasing wholeness, you're moving from it. One of the clearest signs that you're living from overflow is that you naturally begin to give, not because you're trying to earn anything, but because you have something to offer. Your wisdom, your peace, your insight, your encouragement. They begin to flow outward. You no longer give out of obligation or depletion. You give because you are filled, because you have more than enough, because the energy inside you is not afraid of being spent. You trust that what you pour out will return. You trust that there is more where that came from. And in that trust, your generosity expands. Overflow is sustainable because it is rooted. You've built your life on deeper ground. You've learned how to rest without guilt. You've learned how to reset before you break down. You've learned how to protect your energy, how to say no, how to honor your limits without apology. That kind of awareness doesn't happen overnight. It comes from walking through the fire and learning what matters most. From trying to carry too much and deciding that your peace is worth protecting, from surviving seasons of emptiness and promising yourself you won't live like that again. To live from overflow is to live with margin. You create space, not just in your schedule, but in your spirit. Space to breathe, to think, to connect, to create. You're no longer filling every hour with output. You've stopped confusing busyness with productivity. You've stopped wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. Instead, you are intentional. You are strategic. You are present. And presence is powerful. It allows you to listen more closely, to speak more clearly, to lead more effectively. Presence is what gives your life its impact, and it cannot exist when you're constantly overextended. Overflow also brings with it a deeper sense of gratitude, not the kind you have to force, but the kind that comes naturally when you're not in survival mode. You begin to notice things you once rushed past, the quiet moments, the unexpected beauty, the people who stayed, the parts of your story that once felt like failures but now look like foundations. Gratitude becomes your lens, not just because you're trying to be positive, but because you've learned how much it costs to live without it. You've seen what life feels like when you're constantly striving, and now you choose to live differently. This chapter of living from overflow is not the end of growth, it's the beginning of a new kind. It's no longer about fighting to arrive, it's about sustaining what you've built. It's about refining, not just expanding. It's about deepening, not just doing more. It's about asking different questions, not how can I hustle harder, but how can I serve better? Not how do I prove myself, but how do I stay grounded in who I already am? These are the questions of a life lived with depth. Overflow is also where legacy begins. When you are no longer caught up in your own survival, you can begin to think about what you're building beyond yourself, how your actions ripple into your family, your community, your work. You begin to care less about being impressive and more about being impactful. Less about being known and more about being meaningful. You understand that your life speaks even when you're not trying to speak, and so you choose your words and actions carefully, not because of pressure, but because of purpose. Living from overflow does not mean you never return to seasons of tension or struggle. Life is seasonal, and even the most grounded person will encounter drought from time to time. But overflow gives you reserves. It gives you tools. It gives you self-awareness. It gives you a foundation to return to. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds you that your worth was never found in what you accomplished, but in who you became in the process. You are not meant to constantly pour from an empty cup. You are not meant to run yourself dry in pursuit of something you never stopped to enjoy. You are not meant to live in reaction, exhaustion, or perpetual recovery. You are meant to build something sustainable, something that reflects truth, something that feels like peace.